Greetings, everybody. Dennis and Tommy are back with you once again.
It's a miracle. We made it through Isaiah.
We made it through Isaiah, which I thought was very, very good.
I liked it.
I mean, we did a really good job. It's the first time that I've ever gone through Isaiah, verse by verse, not leaving out a single jot or tittle. And I think we learned a lot, and we certainly see how everything that Isaiah was talking about certainly applies to even today.
Well,
It's funny, nothing's changed.
Even
It's
if
all
we
the
did
same.
forget something, I mean, it's just because we learn new things.
Yeah.
Just because we think about new things after we read them, after we exposit them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, and I hope people who are able to follow us certainly got a lot out of it too. And now we're going to move on to something that I've been looking forward to and is quite exciting. And that
you sound excited.
Yeah. And so we're going to go through the 613 mitzvahs found throughout the Torah.
613 commandments,
Which is what
otherwise
a mitzvah
known
is.
as a mitzvah.
Correct. And so I believe that this list was put together by one known as Moses Maimonides.
Right, the Rambam.
Not that he discovered it necessarily,
No.
but he put it together in an organized fashion.
Took it from the Talmud, polished it up, put it in a nice package, and said, here you go.
Yeah, made it easier to go through.
He was the Amazon.com of Torah.
Yeah. Now, these commandments are things that all individuals should follow, but not everyone is actually able to do, because we know out of these 613, there are going to be certain commandments that only apply to the Levites, for example, or the priests. There are commandments in here that only apply to kings. There are commandments in here that are only applied to women. There are commandments that are only applied to men. So while this is the complete list, it is not applicable to every single individual.
Well, let's put it a different way. We can see that Jesus, what he's talking about in Matthew 5:19, that the greatest in heaven, or called from heaven, are those who do the commandments and teach. Well, as you said, some you can't do because some, let's say, are for women, like menstruation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as a man, I can't follow that. I mean, I can follow it in that I can encourage, even force, or at least agree to. But certainly, I wouldn't say, just because I don't do it doesn't mean I'm not going to teach it. Just because we don't have a temple with Levites doesn't mean we're not going to teach it. So when Jesus says the greatest are those who teach, first of all, I don't see how any Jewish person could be against what I just said. So how would you be against Jesus? I mean, if you wanted to have one Jesus verse, and you know, like the famous one is John 3:16, verse of whosoever. And but I mean, for me, it's Matthew 5:19. Those who do and teach are the greatest. So we are, if not doing, not only because we can't, but we're going to find out. We're going to actually talk to you, the audience, about what me and Dennis, actually do and don't do.
Yeah.
This will be a big confession.
Yeah, it really will be. And hopefully through this process, you and I will grow and become better Jews as a result of this.
Or
and hopefully
we'll become
we can
really, really guilty.
Well, that's okay. It's called Jewish guilt.
Yeah.
But hopefully it will encourage others to also begin to explore these commandments and to also begin to implement them into their own lives. You know, one big Christian thing is the commandments are too difficult to do. You've heard this argument before, nobody can do the commandments, which is why Jesus had to come and basically erase them because they were just too difficult to do. Nobody could do it. Nobody was doing it. We know that's not true. But when you say nobody can do all the commandments, that's a true statement because what we just said earlier, there are commandments in there that I simply can't do. Like you said, menstruation. I don't menstruate. I can't do that commandment. There are things about certain offerings that only the priest can do. I can't do that. I'm not a priest. There's no temple. So you can't do those commandments. So correct. You can't do all the commandments either because they're not applicable to you or they're dormant for the time being.
Well, I think what they're saying is, and I think you know this, is that we're all sinners, and anyway you were born this way. Well, the bad part about the Christian ideology about being born in sin is you're doing the same thing we learned in Isaiah. You're blaming God for your condition. You're immediately saying, I'm born a sinner with original sin. well, that's not under my power to change. I'm born that way, so God did it. So he has to fix it. And so what does the Christian ideology do? They set up God as the monster, but also the Savior. And they say, well, then he sent his son to make up for it. Make up for what? I mean, you're the one who's breaking the commandment. Let's take the menstruation, for example, or not take the menstruation. If you're a woman and you're not following it the way it says, then you're not following God's law. Now, of course, what most people do is they say, that's cliched, it's outmoded, we don't do that anymore, we've evolved, the Republicans made me do that, whatever it may be, right? And so the ideology was built up in Christianity to agree with the progressive thought patterns that we've evolved past. And, Karl Marx came along and he said Christianity is pretty close to communism because it is progressive in nature. It gets rid of the old law and brings in new, which is something Marx wanted to do. So Christianity is destructive to the law.
It is. And what's funny about what you're saying is we've read this in Isaiah. Remember we were talking about, well, it says in Isaiah, well, God made me like this, so it's not my fault, which is a Christian stance. But that idea, that thought existed well before Christianity, as we've read in Isaiah, which predates Christianity by how long?
A long time.
So it's kind of interesting that this idea of it's too hard or God made me this way, so I can't do it, has always existed. But at the same time, we do have 613 commandments here that we can sit down, we can read each one, we can discuss it, we can say, how are we not doing this? How is it that we can't do this? And why should we be doing it?
Well, and even in Isaiah we read, my filthiness, my righteousness is like filthy rags. Sometimes I mix up words, and it's funny. But what does that mean? When we read it in Isaiah, it wasn't so much a confession as it was a blaming of God. You know what? Even when I do it right, you still say it's wrong. When am I ever going to be right? Because it's the tone in which you read, my righteousness is like filthy rags. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to start following the commandments? No.
Well, and also, it's interesting how the commandments, in some instances, set up this dichotomy in that you're required to do a certain thing, but by you doing this commandment, it actually makes you almost break another commandment. We've discussed this amongst how the priests have to do that on certain days where they have to work on a Sabbath day.
Well, unfortunately, it exists in that fashion, as you say, that it's written in a certain way so that naysayers and disbelievers and even Christians can come along and say, like it says in the book of Hebrews, well, even the priest breaks the law on the Sabbath day or on the Rosh Hashanah or the Yom Kippur. And everybody goes, right? And then what gets the short shrift is the law. The law gets looked at askance because, well, that'll, there was an X-Files episode, and I remember now what they were talking about, that just passed. And at the end, I want to say it right, I said Sculler and Mulder last time, but it's Mulder and Scully say, they're talking, and Mulder says, it says in the Bible that God told Adam, if you eat this, you'll surely die, but he lived 930 years, so something went awry there. It's like, hello, Adam was actually not going to die at all if he didn't eat the fruit, but what happened was he became mortal. What our real question should be is, why is there a tree of immortality in the Garden of Eden, and why is God saying that we shouldn't let them eat from that when they're obviously immortal? That one can be explained too, that they become immortal like angels rather than immortal as flesh, if that's even possible. So the real conundrum there is why these trees are there at all, and why don't have a barbed wire fence around them. That's the real question. Just a lot of talking. Hey, don't touch the tree. All right, I won't touch the tree. I touched the tree. See? Now you got to die. And everybody goes, what, wasn't that God's fault for putting the tree there? That's the real question.
Yeah, or it's God's plan. He intended it to be that way all along.
There you go. Now, instead of saying God made a mistake, we say we made a mistake by reading it the wrong way. But the thing is, when you and I read it the right way, we are against what other people said. And we know the Christian religion is sort of like a factory. They want to produce a certain thing. So our truth, our University of Truth, goes against the Christian factory that says, look, God made a mistake, but he rectified it with Jesus. And we go, there's no mistake. You just read it wrong. No, we didn't, and we'll kill you. Yeah, you haven't done that in a while. Well, then we'll get a Muslim to kill you. Oh, you didn't just go there, did you? because the Muslims are saying they're following Torah too.
Yep.
And so, what is, as I wrote in the blurb, what is worse? To be passionate about your law where it says to kill the infidel, or to actually have the book of the law attached to your New Testament and go, pshaw? Which one's worse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is bad to have that entire law in your Bible and to never even read it. To never even go back, prior to, it goes Matthew and then Micah. How many people even go back that far? Let's go back and read Micah,
Yeah. And so, well, I mean, it's a few hundred years in between, but yeah, so when we talk about law, the first thing we're talking about is a concept of law, like how do people think about it? Well, Christians think about it as a necessary thing that's attached to their book. Muslims think about it as they're the new Jews. We took over, but then they add stuff that was never there, as do the Mormons.
Well, and their enforcement is uncalled for.
And even in Christianity, like the Seventh-day Adventists say, well, we don't eat pork and we celebrate the Sabbath, but you're still doing the Trinity.
That's right.
And so we're going to find out as we go through. We'll probably have more commentary on religions as we go.
Yeah.
But the law itself is above everything. In other words, we ought to all be doing one law.
That's correct.
If there's going to be one world religion, there has to be a law to follow. As we said, there has to be an SOP, a standard operating procedure. There has to be a quality control division, call it a clergy. And people actually have to be marked, like a book. Well, do we find, and we'll get into that later, do we find,
Yeah.
So let's begin, I guess, with the first commandment.
Okay. Now, out of the 613 that we have here, I actually have these broken down into categories.
Yeah.
The first 10 are under the category of God.
And I have a different, let me just say for the viewers out there, the listeners, that I have a different list than you, because I did my own Maimonides. I took Maimonides' list, which I found to be messy, and I made it better. And I have broken it down into number, category, as you just said, God, with G-D, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have two things that follow as far as there's a difficulty and there's a whether or not I do it. Okay, so the first one, for example, has MED, medium. So I think it's a medium difficulty, and then Y, meaning yes, I do this. Okay.
Right.
Then I have what it says in Talmud, and I have the actual Torah verses for it. And then after that, I have my own opinion. So what we'll do is, why don't you do yours first, every time?
All right.
Okay. And I'll add in my extras later.
And we'll discuss.
And then discuss.
All right. So number 1 under God is to know that God exists. And there are 2 references for this given here. And we'll explore each one. So the first one is in Exodus 20:2.
Well, actually, we're not going to discuss yet. Remember, we're going to.
We're going to read the verses first.
Oh, are we going to read the verses
Yes.
first? Oh, okay.
So let's go to Exodus,
All right.
chapter 20, verse 2.
See, we even have an SOP on how to do the SOP.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but I also have I'm using a Christian document as well to help us out here. I'm going to use Nelson's Cross Reference Guide to the Bible as well.
Okay, so basically you're going to have a commentary from this guy, and my commentary is going to be from me.
Yeah, and I'm going to have my commentary that's also found in my Tanakh here as well.
And I'm also going to use my reference